My husband has resented me for what happened with a horse. And to this day, he hasn't forgiven me. However, I can't deny that my experience with that animal was interesting. One afternoon, I was walking near a stream when I noticed a beautiful horse grazing in a nearby field. Its sleek coat and gentle eyes immediately caught my attention. Feeling intrigued, I approached the fence to get a closer view. To my surprise, the horse trotted over, almost as if it wanted to greet me. It seemed very friendly, so I decided to squeeze through the fence for a better look. As I got closer, I reached out my hand and softly petted the horse. Its fur was incredibly smooth, and it seemed to enjoy the affection. Since it didn't pull away, it was the first time I had ever been that close to a horse, and I was captivated by its size and strength, all while remaining calm and gentle. While admiring the horse, I noticed something hanging down that I assumed was part of its anatomy. It was a furry sheath, and I thought it might be something the horse played with occasionally. I remember thinking it seemed small for such a large animal, but I didn't think much more of it as I continued petting the horse along its side. It seemed completely at ease, standing still with relaxed ears, letting me run my hand over its sleek coat, feeling more at ease myself. I decided to explore a bit more and gently moved my hand underneath the horse. It didn't seem to mind, so I kept going, curious about what I was feeling. When my hand reached what I thought was its sheath, I couldn't resist my curiosity. I wrapped my hand around it, surprised at how soft it felt on the outside, while something firm inside felt like a tube. I wasn't exactly sure what it was at first, but it certainly piqued my interest. The more I held it, the more I noticed the firm part inside expanding as I continued. Something began to happen. The tube inside started to emerge from the furry covering. I was shocked and intrigued at the same time, watching as it grew right in front of me. It was much larger than I initially expected, and I couldn't believe how it kept increasing in size. Before long, it had reached about a foot in length, and I was amazed by how large it had become. I gently ran my hand along its length, and the horse seemed to thoroughly enjoy it, shaking its head and whinnying softly as if to show its pleasure. My curiosity deepened, and I decided to crouch down to get an even closer look. The horse's package was unlike anything I had ever seen before, and as I observed more closely, I noticed the large, finely shaped testicles hanging beneath. They were far bigger than I imagined, almost brushing the ground. I reached out to touch them and felt a soft texture with movement inside, like something shifting. It reminded me of water, making me wonder about their contents. Then something unexpected happened. A thick, clear, syrupy liquid began to drip from its tip. At first, I wasn't sure what it was, but my curiosity kept me going. The liquid slowly trickled down, eventually forming small puddles on the ground. The more I touched the horse, the more of this shiny, sticky fluid appeared, resembling honey and making the ground beneath us a bit slippery. The horse clearly enjoyed the attention, as it moved its head and made soft sounds of contentment. Excited by the fluid, I wanted to feel more of it in my hands. However, this time, the horse's package had grown even larger, and I could barely wrap my hand around it. I was amazed by how much it had expanded. Then, I had an impulsive idea. I wanted to taste it. I opened my mouth wide, trying to fit the package inside, but it was simply too large. Despite my efforts, it wouldn't fit. But I couldn't give up because the taste of the fluid was so peculiar. As it flowed into my mouth, the liquid trickled down my throat, and I couldn't help but savor it. The flavor was incredible, and I was amazed by how juicy it was. I kept wanting more, even though I knew it was more than I could handle. I tried to manage the flow, but I had to keep swallowing to prevent myself from choking. It tasted like apples, which made it even harder to stop because I love that flavor so much. It felt strange, but in a way that was oddly enjoyable. Then something surprising happened. The horse's size increased even more, yes, even larger than before. I was in disbelief, thinking, how can it get any bigger? I was stunned. I started wondering if there was something magical going on. Its package stretched my lips so much that it hurt a little, but I kept going. Before I knew it, The horse began to spray my mouth with long streams of fluid. It came so fast that I couldn't keep up, and some slipped out from between my lips. It was messy, but the taste was so good that I didn't mind at all. As the fluid kept flowing, I tried my hardest to drink as much as possible, but it was just too much. The more I tried, the more it spilled, making everything wet and sticky. It was both funny and thrilling at the same time. I had never experienced anything like it before. I was enjoying myself. And as things got even wilder, I started feeling hot. My knees gave out, and I sank to the ground, reluctantly letting the horse's package fall against me. It began splashing more fluid all over me. The liquid sprayed onto my face and hair, and the cool droplets felt refreshing. It was like a mini water fight, and I loved every second of it. I couldn't stop giggling as I wiped the fluid from my face, but it just kept coming. When the horse finally finished, I realized I was a complete mess. My hair was soaked and sticking out in funny directions, and my clothes were covered in splashes of fluid. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I burst out laughing even more. It was one of those silly, joyful moments you never want to forget. Still dripping, I stood up and patted the horse on its side. "Good boy," I said, feeling thankful for such a fun day. But to my shock, what I thought was a playful, lighthearted moment turned into something I never expected. It turned out my husband had seen everything. I was stunned and embarrassed. I had been enjoying my time with the horse instead of spending it with him, and I could see the disappointment on his face. I didn't know what to say or do. My heart sank. "Please let me explain," I begged, feeling a knot in my stomach. I couldn't believe this was happening. My husband stood there, looking deeply upset, and I could tell he was hurt. I wanted to make things right, but I didn't know how. I had never seen him this angry before, and it scared me. "How can you explain this?" he shouted, his voice louder than I had ever heard it. It was like he was exploding with frustration and confusion. I couldn't find the right words to soothe him, and that made me feel even worse. His voice echoed in my ears, and the weight of what I had done hit me hard. I wished I could take everything back, but it was too late. As he kept shouting, I stood there frozen. The fun I had earlier felt like a distant memory, and now I was left with the consequence. All I could do was hope he'd listen to me and that we could find a way to repair things. But all I felt in that moment was guilt and regret. I tried to show him how much I cared, hoping he'd forget what happened and forgive me. "Please, just listen to me," I said softly, hoping he'd understand. But deep down, I felt a creeping fear. I knew my actions had hurt him deeply, and I wasn't sure my words could fix anything. "Get away from me," he yelled, pushing me so hard that I nearly lost my balance. His voice was filled with such anger, and it shattered my heart to hear him say those words. I wanted to reach out and explain myself, but it felt like a wall had come between us. "No, you're disgusting. I never thought you'd turn out like this," he continued. His words sliced through me like ice. I reached for his hands, trying to show him how sorry I was, but he pulled away. Seeing the disappointment in his eyes hurt more than anything, and I felt like I was losing him. I desperately wished I could undo everything, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Despite my frustration, I didn't give up. Instead of walking away, I gently cued his face and tried to kiss him, hoping it would make things better. For a brief moment, I succeeded, but I could still see the anger in his eyes. He wasn't the same person anymore, and I could feel the growing distance between us even as we kissed. "Yuck, get away from me," he spat out. And when he said that, it felt like my world stopped. The hatred in his voice was so intense that I didn't even recognize him anymore. My heart sank as I realized that the man I loved now despised me, and no matter what I did, it seemed like there was no way to fix things. "Why did you do this to me?" he asked, his voice breaking as tears welled up in his eyes. Seeing him cry hurt more than his anger. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it better, but all I could manage was a weak, "I'm so sorry," my voice trembling. He wiped his tears, his voice full of pain. "Am I really not enough for you that you had to go and do this with an animal? The silence that followed was unbearable because, deep down, I knew he was right. What was I thinking? How could I have done something so terrible? I had no words, only regret. I stood frozen, unsure of what to say, my mind racing to find something, anything, that could fix this disaster. But nothing came to me. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and it crushed me. I never intended to cause him this much pain, but now I had done something unforgivable. He turned away, refusing to even glance in my direction. It felt as if I had lost him completely. "I never thought you'd do something like this," he muttered, his voice icy. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Those words cut deeper than anything. I tried to step closer, hoping to show him how sorry I was, but he backed away, increasing the distance between us. "Please let me explain," I begged, but deep down, I knew no explanation would be enough. He shook his head, his expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You broke my trust. How can you expect me to just forgive this?" he asked, his voice shaking. I had no response. My actions had destroyed something precious, something we might never be able to repair. Tears streamed down my face, but they couldn't undo the damage. We stood there for what felt like hours, engulfed in silence, neither of us knowing what to say. The air between us was thick with all the unspoken words. Finally, he broke the silence. His voice was weary and filled with defeat. "I need some time," he whispered. "I can't be around you right now." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving me standing there surrounded by the mess I had caused. I collapsed to the ground, my knees hitting the dirt as the tears fell uncontrollably. In front of me, the horse stood peacefully, unaware of the turmoil inside me. Watching it only deepened my sense of guilt. I couldn't believe how far I had gone, how foolish I had been. I sobbed, overwhelmed by the weight of my actions. My chest tightened, and I struggled to breathe. I had ruined everything. With each sob, I grew more angry at myself. How could I have been so reckless? So selfish? My fists clenched, and before I knew it, I was punching the ground over and over. I wanted the pain to stop, but it wouldn't. My hands hurt as they hit the hard earth, but I didn't care. The pain inside was much worse. Why? Why did I do this? I cried out, my voice trembling. I wanted to turn back time and erase the terrible mistake I had made. The horse stood there, its eyes calm and gentle, completely unaware of the chaos it had caused in my life. That only made me feel more guilty. I looked at it, and my stomach churned. My husband would never forgive me for this, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive myself. Everything was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. The more I thought about it, the harder I cried, pounding the ground with each painful thought. I sat there for what seemed like hours, the sun beginning to set in the distance. My hands were filthy and sore, my body exhausted from the crying, but I couldn't stop. I felt so alone, so broken. The remorse was suffocating, and I knew that no matter how many tears I shed, it wouldn't change anything. The damage was already done, and now I had to face the consequences. As I sat there crying, I realized that I needed to make a promise to myself. I took a deep breath and wiped my tears away with the back of my hand. "I will never do anything like this again," I whispered, my voice cracking. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be times when I felt tempted, especially when I saw a horse or anything that reminded me of that day. But I vowed to myself that I would be stronger. I would take steps to avoid situations like this, no matter how difficult it might be. I knew I had to change my life for the better. I would start by avoiding places where horses were around, farms, pastures, anywhere that could lead to another foolish mistake. I wanted to prove to my husband that I was serious about changing, that I could become the wife he deserved. My heart ached for his forgiveness, and I hoped that by making these changes, he would see I was trying to be better. With the sun setting behind me, I stood up, a new determination washing over me. I took one last look at the horse and whispered a soft goodbye. "I hope you understand," I said gently, knowing it was time to move on. I walked away from the pasture, vowing to rebuild my life. I wanted my husband back, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but I was ready to face the challenges ahead and create a brighter future, even though my husband isn't back yet. I feel a glimmer of hope inside me. I know that when the time comes for him to return, he will see a changed woman. This new version of me is determined to leave the past behind and make better choices. I want him to see someone who has grown, learned, and become better. I've promised myself that I will never, ever do something so foolish again, especially not with a horse.